Russia launches its largest attack on Kyiv in weeks.
All 24 states that make up the European Council call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza.
World leaders gather at a nuclear summit in Brussels to consider the use of nuclear energy to help combat climate change and prevent dependence on Russian energy.
Deep divisions on military aid for Ukraine have emerged amongst the Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary and Slovakia at a meeting in Prague.
Russia launched its largest attack on Kyiv in weeks, as landing debris injured several and damaged schools and other infrastructures. Whilst in the northeast town of Kharkiv, emergency workers were still present at the site of a Russian missile strike a day after, which killed 5 people and injured several more.
All the air defense provided to Ukraine, in particular by European countries, keep our cities and villages alive. But the existing air defense systems are not enough to protect our entire territory from Russian terror. And it's not a matter of hundreds of systems, but of an achievable number to protect all the territory of Ukraine.
While Russia continues to expand its military capabilities, the Russian Defense Ministry paid a visit to a weapons production facility in Nizhny Novgorod, in which he inspected aviation weapons, artillery and tank shells. In Ukraine, construction workers dug deep trenches, building defensive fortifications in the north region of Kharkiv, near the shared border with Russia, where intense battles are underway.
The EU has called for an immediate humanitarian pause leading to a sustainable ceasefire in Gaza. It's the first time all 27 member states have agreed to urge both sides to stop the conflict given the unfolding catastrophe there. Member states have also called for the release of all Israeli hostages in Gaza and have reiterated the EU's condemnation of the Hamas terrorist attack in Israel on October 7th. It says Israel needs to respect international humanitarian law as an occupying power.
We agree that the role played by UNRWA is essential. We call on the government of Israel not to launch a ground operation in Rafah, because we can imagine what would be the consequences if such an operation would be launched. And finally, I would like to make very clear that we ask and we call on the respect for the international law, including with regard with the illegal settlements.
Concluding the first day of a 2-day summit, leaders also discussed how to finance Ukrainian military efforts in defending their country from Russian aggression. Varying proposals are on the table, including capital from the European Investment Bank and using profits from frozen Russian assets.
Indeed, there's a strong support to use, at the moment, being the windfall profits or proceeds of the immobilized assets for military purposes for Ukraine. And I told the leaders that if we are swift now in concluding the proposal, we could disburse the first billion on the 1st of July already.
In an historic announcement, the EU has also agreed to open membership negotiations with Bosnia. And today, Friday, there'll be a clearer discussion about the imposition of tariffs on Russian grain into the European Union. Shona Murray, Euronews, Brussels.
Over 30 leaders and delegations from around the world gathered at a nuclear summit in Brussels. They're thought to be backing the use of nuclear energy to help achieve the goal of a climate-neutral globe, while giving more countries an added sense of economic and security independence, as the war in Ukraine lays bare a dependence on Russian energy over the past decade.
The next steps are already taking place, in fact, and these are the many projects that are being developed in many countries in Europe, but also in the global south, in China, even in Russia, in the United States, in Canada, in Korea, in Japan, where we see that nuclear is returning, and I would say in a very important way, in a very dynamic way.
Germany is not attending the meeting as it switched off its last 3 nuclear reactors almost a year ago, completing a process that received wide political support after Japan's Fukushima nuclear reactor disaster in 2011. But some argue for a rethink after energy prices spiked because of the war in Ukraine. At least 13 people have been injured, including a child, after Russian strikes targeted Kyiv. It's Russia's first attack in Ukraine's capital in 6 weeks. Ukraine's Air Force said Russia launched 2 ballistic missiles and 29 cruise missiles, but Ukrainian air defences intercepted them all. The injured were hit by falling wreckage in residential and industrial areas, they said. 79 people were evacuated from an apartment block.
Я проснулась от первого взрыва, выбежала. А потом незадолго уже был второй взрыв, очень страшно. Если бы сын не вскочил, его бы уже не было. У нас вся квартира, все уничтожено. Все этой взрывной волной уничтожена мебель, окна, двери, все. Это кошмар. Будь проклята эта война, этот Путин.
Russia has been ramping up its airstrikes on Ukraine in recent days. On Wednesday, at least 2 people were killed when a Russian airstrike hit a home 50 kilometres southwest of the city of Donetsk. It's feared that there may be more victims trapped under the rubble.
In a meeting with the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Wednesday, the United Nations Secretary-General said Europe was more important than ever in what he called a dark moment for the world. Antonio Guterres also called for a just peace in Ukraine that respects sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity.
We are meeting at a particularly dark moment when Europe's role on the global stage is more important than ever. In Ukraine, 2 years ago, Russia's full-scale invasion has caused and is causing terrible suffering, stoking global tensions and undermining international law and the UN Charter. Meanwhile, the war continues in Gaza. Nothing justifies the abhorrent acts of Hamas on October 7, and nothing justifies the collective punishment of the Palestinian people.
Guterres also said everything possible must be done to put an end to the Israel-Hamas war, achieve an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and guarantee the unconditional release of the hostages.
The Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue kicked off on Tuesday with speeches from German Vice-Chancellor Robert Habeck and Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock. The conference is paving the way for energy to become 100% renewable. We visited one of Berlin's disused airports ahead of the conference to find out exactly how the future of renewables could work.
Hier auf dem ehemaligen Flughafen Tegel, was ja eines der größten Entwicklungsprojekte in ganz Europa ist, sind wir die Pioniere, der Anfang dieser Entwicklung. Hier sollen in den nächsten Jahren die Stadt der Zukunft errichtet werden und erfunden werden. Und wir sind hier mit aktuell 17 verschiedenen Startups vor Ort und entwickeln die Lösungen, die die Stadt der Zukunft braucht.
It is estimated that the climate-neutral city will create up to 20,000 jobs, with several companies already working together on harnessing renewable technology. The ceasefire project combines energy storage with the production of hydrogen.
So we want to make 100% renewables possible with our device. And what we need for that, in order to end our fossil fuel dependence, green energy. And in Germany, we already have lots of renewables, 3-4 times of what we actually need. And that problem is just going to increase going forward. So we need to think about battery storage.
With Europe determined to wean itself of Russian gas, the HH2E project has been ahead of the curve by trying to develop technology to integrate hydrogen into the main grid.
Langfristig werden die Energiepreise senken, aber wir brauchen eben schon jetzt den Markthochlauf aktiv unterstützen, eben dieses Ziel zu erreichen.
This year, the ceasefire team are presenting their technology to the Energy Conference, hopeful it will be the start of making renewable energy more accessible to the market.
This technology is already being rolled out to the first customer later this year. With funding of the project expecting to surpass 100 million euros, it will need government financing to become part of the mainstream energy infrastructure. Liv Stroud in Berlin for Euronews.
якщо ви маєте зброю і знаєте, як нею користуватися, можна дати бій, якщо буде екстремальна ситуація.
Стійка. Проблема.
Наші жінки були беззахисними, вони були в окупації. Тому ми вирішили навчати жінок захищати себе.
Раз, два! Раз, два! Положили автоматы на землю! Автоматы на землю! Побежали обратно! Левая нога!
Ніхто ніколи не попередить, чи зайдуть знову війська Російської Федерації до нас. І якщо це станеться, я буду підготовленою. І я хочу боротися за свій дім разом зі своїм чоловіком. Заради нашої дитини, заради її дітей.
Доброго дня, бажаємо вам. Ну, як бачите, тривога, ми дітей відправили ж у бомбосховище.
Is it part of your life to go to the shelter all the time? Are you used to it?
Поначалу війни я боялась тривог, а зараз я якось вже звикла до того, що прильоти, БПЛА, шахеди і все таке.
Тривога знову. Все, збираємося, діти. Збираємося, виходимо. Всі виходимо. Отак ми працюємо. Від тривоги до тривоги. Але ми їх не боїмося.